there a problem? Welcome everybody to another Friends, Food, and Faith. So tonight we're going to talk about the importance of the Blessed Virgin Mary when it comes to our faith, and not only just the Catholic Church, but Christianity in general. Mary is somewhat of a divisive figure in some of the denominations of Christianity. Some tend to diminish her in many ways, that kind of believe that she was just happened to be the person that was picked to do this, and there's really nothing special about her. We as a Catholic Church hire in high regard, and we would even say that she's one of the highest of the saints, right? She is the one, probably the most perfect human being next to Jesus, except the difference is that Mary does not have the divine nature while Jesus does. So there's a lot of things we can say about Mary that's really, really important. And actually, I want to start with maybe this reading from the Catechism. But before we do that, maybe I'd be fitting if we just say Hail Mary. So, Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Amen. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners now and at the hour of our death. Amen. Father, Son, Holy Spirit. So I want to read something. This is from paragraph 487 of the Universal Catechism. And I think this gives a lot of clarity about what we're going to talk about tonight, and really Mary's importance. So it says, what the Catholic faith believes about Mary is based on what it believes about Christ. And what it teaches about Mary illumines, in turn, its faith in Christ. Now, that's a very profound statement, I think, by the Catechism. And the rest of this portion talks about like Mary's predestination, like Mary had to be the person. It talks about the Immaculate Conception, that Mary was born she was conceived without sin. Mary's fiat, her divine motherhood, her perpetual virginity. And it also talks about basically Mary's motherhood, not only just for Jesus Christ, but also for the church. So those paragraphs in the Catechism range from number 47 all the way through to number 507. So the church takes a lot of care to talk about Mary and its understanding of the faith. So, but that starting point is really what it's all based on. That what we know about Mary tells us what we know about Christ. I think the reason I picked this topic this evening is because, as many of you may know, October is the month of the Rosary. Now, does anyone know why this is the month of the Rosary?
Doesn't it have to do something with Fatima?
Well, one of the apparitions of Fatima happened in October, true, but also the apparition of Fatima happened over 9 months.
I know.
So it's not unique just for October. But yes, one of the Fatima visions happened in October, on the 13th of October. Yes.
That's my best guess.
Well, it's kind of interesting because this year we didn't have mass on this particular day because all the priests here were off goofing off at the Ozarks, as people may think, but that's not really what we're doing. Anyway, we celebrated on Friday of this past week the memorial of Our Lady of the Rosary. Now, that's on October 7th every year. And that was actually the celebration started actually in the 16th century, I think 1535 to be exact. And that's a significant day, but not many people know what we actually celebrate on that day. Does anyone know off the top of their head what that day commemorates? Because the Rosary actually was around before that, right? It was actually been around since about the 5th century. And the Rosary started with praying in the monasteries of the 150 Psalms. But to make it more accessible to laity as a devotion, those 150 Psalms were condensed to 50. Actually, and really the three mysteries of the Rosary are commemorating those 150 Psalms, right? So if you do 3 of the mysteries, original mysteries, you do 150 Hail Marys, which is in unison with 150 Psalms in the Bible. But that came really more later, more around the 7th or 8th century, and it really wasn't solidified until St. Dominic, which happened about the 12th century. So the Rosary was around a lot before 1535. So it wasn't actually the invention of the rosary we celebrate on February 7th, or no, October 7th. It actually commemorates a naval battle. So in the
I know this.
Do you know this one? You okay?
It's here, but it won't come out.
Okay, all right, okay, great, cool, yeah, great.
Constantinople?
No, close. In the 16th century, there was a rise in Islam, and more importantly, the Turkish Empire was growing. Right, they came from the Ottomans. It kind of grew together, and at that time in the 16th century, the Turks were ruling. They were kind of running roughshod all over Europe, all over the Middle East, and their empire stretched pretty far. So basically, the Turkish Empire and the Muslim lands were kind of synonymous with each other. It came all the way up into Spain, right? And even went into the Middle East and all the way up almost to Austria in Europe, right? So there was a time where there was a real concern that maybe Islam would actually conquer through Europe and the church would be destroyed. And a major turning point of that happened at the Battle of Lepanto. So at Lepanto, the Spanish Armada, which was significantly outnumbered, significantly outmanned, was defending the Spanish coast from the Muslim invaders who had a significantly much larger armada. And everyone thought they were going to lose, right? But Pius V, St. Pius V at the time, the Pope, called for all Catholics throughout the world to pray the rosary for the Spanish Armada. And lo and behold, what happened? The Spanish Armada not only won, they won significantly. To the point where after that battle, the Spanish Armada was actually probably the most powerful armada on the face of the earth.
Wow.
Right? Pretty impressive. And that was attributed to the intercession of the Blessed Mother through the praying of the Rosary by all of Christendom at the time, right? So that's what we actually are commemorating on October 7th, right? And because of that, we call October the month of the Rosary, right? So the Rosary is kind of, not that it shouldn't be prayed every day, but it's kind of, a big part of the devotional life of many Catholics. And so I thought it'd be important to talk about Our Lady in the midst of this great month that we celebrate. Also, May is the month of Our Lady too, because of the many Marian feast days like Our Lady of Fatima and the Feast of Visitation happened that month, right? So also a lot of times there's a tradition of May crowning in May. So these 2 months, kind of opposite ends of the year, May and October, are kind of elevated as months dedicated to Our Lady. So I thought it'd be fitting that we talk about that a little bit tonight. So what do we mean when we talk about what we understand about Mary is what we understand about Christ? Well, that was a big point of discussion for about the first 400 years of Christianity. We understand that after Jesus' resurrection, he handed up, in apostolic succession, handed everything that he knew to his apostles. His apostles, in turn, handed everything down to their successive bishops and priests. And the magisterium of the church has retained that tradition all throughout history since the very ascension of Jesus, right? But we understand that even the beginning of the church, there was these different debates that were happening about the nature of Jesus and what we can say about Jesus. And there were many different ideas about who Jesus was. And that caused many heresies to exist. And of course, in our say, we kind of talk about heresy as being a good and a bad, right? So it's bad in the fact that it's actually promoting something that's not true, but it's also good because it helps the church understand deeper the teachings of Christ, right? We understand that everything's been revealed to the church through the apostolic succession. That salvation history ended at the death of John the Apostle. So everything was revealed up to that point, and after that, we have this fullness of faith that was given to us that is used, a lens in which you interpret it, different aspects and circumstances which happen in the world and society. More recently, we kind of see that in development of like technological advancements, right? So we understand that technology is really kind of morally neutral, but how we use those technologies can define the morality, right, of the agent, the person doing it. And we use the teaching of Jesus to kind of understand that and apply that to figure out where maybe the boundaries would be in those aspects, right? Well, in the early church, they didn't really have a lot of that. It was there was a lot of things open to interpretation. So one of the big heresies that popped up in the very early church was this heresy called Arianism. And what Arianism professed was that Jesus was the highest created human. He was a created being. He wasn't divine in nature, equal to God, but he was created by God and elevated to a certain point by the grace of God to the point where he was about the closest as divine as you possibly could get, right? And maybe even obtained divinity through his, grace given to him. Okay. So in other words, Jesus was not co-eternal with the Father. He didn't exist with the Father in all creation, all throughout time, and all throughout history. Now that was kind of debated in the Council of Nicaea, and it was determined that Arianism was an error, and that Jesus had to be co-eternal with the Father, or else his actions nothing really makes sense in the life of Jesus. His claims cannot be true that he actually is the Son of God, because as a son, you would share nature with your Father, right? That's how we said in our human aspects, right? That humans are born to a nature that, as a man and woman have a child, they are human. They don't give birth to a cow or to a monkey or to an alien, right? That's a human nature that is given. That Jesus was not born of the Father, right? That he wasn't like God created him or birthed him, but he was co-eternal with the Father. They're equal in majesty, equal in essence, equal in being, right? So that was kind of settled, and I see now the Arianism kind of lingered about, and then there was these other different kind of heresies popped up, monophysitism, right? And monovolitism, which thought that maybe Jesus was divine, but he wouldn't have been human. So his human nature was more like a veil that he wore, right? It was like a mask, right? So he wasn't really human. He didn't actually suffer because he couldn't be human, right? He appeared to suffer as like a theater, right? But he didn't actually suffer. Well, that's when the church understood that Jesus actually had two wills and two natures, right? And two minds in many respects, right? But they were contained in one person of the Trinity. Wonderful. But a lot of that wasn't really clear until the Council of Ephesus in 431. And it really centered around this debate about if Mary was the mother of God or the mother of Christ. So in the Greek, we call that Christotokos, the Christ bearer, or Theotokos, the God bearer, right? Which one do we line up on? Well, if we really believe that Jesus was really divine, well, you have to be the God bearer, but how can a human being give birth to God? That seems kind of counterintuitive, and that seems to be very odd. That's against the way nature works. Okay, maybe she's the Christotokos. Okay, well, if Jesus was just the Christ and the Messiah, that means he couldn't have been divine, right? So, okay, he may have been the Savior, anointed by God to be the Savior, but he couldn't be divine, right? Because how can God be born, right? So this stuff was kind of gone back and forth, and it wasn't until the Council of Ephesus in 431 where it was really kind of decided, no, we have to decide that Mary was the God bearer. That Mary was the source of Jesus' divine nature, but was the source of his human nature. That's the one that gave him his body, right? That allowed for the human soul to be fused to the divine soul in her womb so that a Savior could actually take on our nature as human beings. And that's really the importance of Ephesus, the importance of Mary. Because we have to understand that she wasn't just some lady that was picked at random by God to say, okay, why don't you go ahead and take this one for the team, right? That, you're going to bear a human, he's going to be the Savior, but that's it, right? And when we look at everything in context, it really makes sense that we have to hold that, right? So yeah, the council back and forth, everyone decided that upheld the divine and the human nature of Jesus by saying that Mary actually bore God, gave birth to God. It was very clear what that meant. Again, not that that all of a sudden Jesus appeared in the scene through the birth through Mary. Jesus always existed before Mary and before Jesus was given his body, but he took on our human nature through the incarnation that was allowed by Mary's yes, by Mary's fiat. Thy will be done, right?
Is that what that means?
Yes,
Okay.
right. So that's a very important yes that we have to recognize as Christians. Now, some people may say, well, what if Mary said no? What would happen then? So Mary could have said no. Yeah, she could have. Well, okay, that just goes to show that she wasn't anything special. She just happened to say yes. So if she said no, well, then God would have gone to the next person and found someone else. Okay, but God does everything perfectly and in his perfect plan. And is it possible that God would have created a perfect human being that was inclined and just was basically so in tune with his will that even though that being could say no, they wouldn't?
Question.
Yeah.
And I know it's not an instantaneous yes on Mary's part, although I don't think it was. But and Gabriel was the one who came down to announce this, could they have had a conversation?
Well,
And could he or did Mary say, I need to pray about this?
Well, go ahead.
Or, like I said, did she just hear what Gabriel says, and then immediately it is clear within her entire being, and that's when she says yes?
Well, that's a good question, Kate. And I think what we can turn to is scripture for that. So if we turn to Luke.
In what?
What's that?
She's gonna get it up for
He's
you.
gonna get it up.
Yeah, sure.
So we go to for those watching at home, I'm actually pulling up the gospel. The Gospel of Luke, chapter 1. We have basically starts with John. Chapter 1 is actually pretty long in Luke. And so we have this announcement of the birth of Jesus. So let me go and share this on our I'll share our screen. So people can come, that's a very good question. And if we actually look at this, chapter 1, verse 26. In the 6th month, the angel Gabriel was sent from God to a town of Galilee called Nazareth, to a virgin betrothed to a man named Joseph of the house of David. And the virgin's name was Mary. And coming to her, he said, Hail, favored one, the Lord is with you. But she was greatly troubled at what was said and pondered what sort of greeting this might be. Then the angel said to her, Do not be afraid, Mary, for you have been found favor with God. Behold, you will conceive in your womb and bear a son, and you shall name him Jesus. He will be great and will be called Son of the Most High, and the Lord God will give him the throne of David his father, and he will rule over the house of Jacob forever, and of his kingdom there will be no end. But Mary said to the angel, How can this be, since I have no relations with a man? So there is a dialogue, right? And the angel said to her in reply, The Holy Spirit will come upon you, and the power of the Most High will overshadow you. Therefore, the child to be born will be called Holy Son of God. And behold, Elizabeth, your relative, has also conceived a son in her old age. And this is the 6th month for her who was called barren. For nothing will be impossible for God. Mary said, Behold, I am the handmaid of the Lord. May it be done to me according to your word. Then the angel departed from her. Now, this is a very interesting dialogue. So yeah, there is a little bit of a dialogue. And we don't get really a sense of time.
Right.
But I think there is a level of pondering. So, I mean, it doesn't seem like it would have been maybe a long period of time of pondering, maybe a few hours, who knows. But what's interesting about this dialogue is there was a dialogue earlier when Gabriel came to Zechariah, the father of John the Baptist. So there's kind of a similar exchange. So let's read about that. So Elizabeth was barren. Once he was serving as priest when his visions turned before God, according to the practice of the priestly service, he was chosen by lot into the sanctuary of the Lord to burn incense. Then, when the whole assembly of the people was praying outside at the hour of the incense offering, the angel of the Lord, presumably Gabriel, the same Gabriel, right, appeared to him, standing at the right of the altar of incense. Zechariah was troubled by what he saw, and fear came upon him. But the angel said to him, "Do not be afraid, Zechariah, because your prayer has been heard. Your wife Elizabeth will bear you a son, and you shall name him John. And you will have joy and gladness, and many will rejoice at his birth. For it will be great in the sight of the Lord. He'll drink neither wine nor strong drink. He'll be filled with the Holy Spirit, even from his mother's womb. And he will turn many of the children of Israel to the Lord their God. Go from the spirit of Elijah to turn the hearts of fathers toward children, and the disobedient to the understanding of the righteous, for a people fit for the Lord." Then Zechariah said to the angel, "How shall I know this? For I am an old man, my wife is advanced in years." And the angel said to him in reply, "I am Gabriel, who stand before God. I was sent to speak to you and announce to you this good news, but now you will be speechless and unable to talk until the day these things take place, because you do not believe my words to be fulfilled at their proper time." Now, that's a very similar dialogue with Mary, right? What's the difference here?
Mary was secure in her knowledge of God and of herself as a woman, whereas Zechariah is a maybe kind of
Wishy-washy.
Maybe. I think that's true. I think Mary had this sense of faith,
Mhm.
that trust in God, that, hey, whatever you say, I'm going to trust it's going to be the best thing for me.
even though everything is like
Kaboom. Right.
She's like, okay,
Sure.
fine.
Yeah. I mean, so there's a level of deep faith compared to Zechariah. But it seems like their dialogue is very similar.
Yeah.
I think the main difference is Zechariah is saying, well, wait a minute, I'm way too old. And you can almost hear the angel Gabriel saying, so what? Right? That's happened before. Look at Abraham and Sarah, right? Look at Samson, his parents. Look at Samuel. So there's evidence of this in salvation history that your age really doesn't really matter. God can bring about in a natural way a birth, even if you're past childbearing age. So that's not a problem. You're doing it in a natural way. There's really, as long as you're open to life, that's going to happen. With Mary, it's happening in an unnatural way, a supernatural way. When she says, well, how can this be? Because I don't know a man. Whenever we see "no" in the Bible, that's kind of a euphemism for I've never actually slept with somebody, laid with somebody, right? Or when we say I know somebody, it means I have laid with them, right? What Mary's saying here is I'm a virgin, right? So I'm not in a state where I can actually conceive a child. So how? That's a much different question.
Yeah.
In one way, well, that's sure. If you do the deed that creates the child can come. With her, it's like, I'm not doing the deed. So how's that going to happen? So it's a reasonable question to ask. Where Zechariah's question, well, that's kind of unreasonable to ask because, well, duh. Right? You should know how a child is made, right?
And is that maybe, how do I want to say this? Joseph knew that she was still virginal. Is that possibly why he was a little bit more uncertain about completing the wedding?
We'll get that in a second. Okay, that's a good question. So what we can glean from this in the context of this conversation with Gabriel and Mary is that, first off, this is going to happen in a supernatural way. So her question was very reasonable. But also her fiat is is actually heroic. Right? Because here's the thing about Mary. We have a tradition of the Catholic Church, and Mary actually was a very educated person. There's a tradition that Mary would have actually trained with the rabbis in the temple and the synagogue. So when the angel came to her and said, hey, you know what? You're going to conceive and bear a son, and he's going to be the Son of God, the Savior of the world.
She knew what he was talking about.
She knew exactly what he was talking about.
See, that's new to me. That's not what I'm.
She knew that that meant, now maybe not all the details, but she knew that child would have to die, that she would have to witness that death, that child would suffer, and she would be witness to it. She even knew that because of her yes, and the fact that she was not living with her husband, there could be scandal from that, and talk, and judgment, and possibly even death for her. Yet she still said yes. Now, the other thing that really shows about her is that she had a special grace to do so. And we've seen that before in salvation history. Can anyone think of any other figure or figures who were conceived or created without mortal sin?
I've never heard of any.
Adam and Eve.
Adam and Eve.
Oh, yeah.
Adam
They
and
were-
Eve, yeah, they were given the preternatural gifts, right? Meaning they didn't suffer from death and pain,
Until
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 they
the
did-
fall,
Yeah.
which makes the fall even more tragic.
I know, because they drug us all in it.
Well, but even for them, because they were not designed that way. Now they were given free will, sure, they could have sinned, which obviously they did, but they weren't disposed to do that. Which makes their turning away from God even that much more against their very nature.
Okay, I have a question.
Sure.
And it's because of this conversation, of course,
Mhm.
but I've been listening to Father John Ricardo
Okay.
online,
Yeah.
and I have no clue now. He mentioned, straight ahead. Number one, we are creatures.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, I was like, okay,
Yeah.
new starting point.
Yep.
Because again, that's not something that I had ever been taught. And he said that because Adam and Eve, prior to the serpent
Mhm.
convincing Eve, there was no shame. There
Yeah.
was no shame, there was
Right.
no doubt.
Yeah.
There was no hidden agenda.
Right. There was no judgmentalness. Everything that we experience as humanity in the negative aspect did not exist with Adam and Eve until they fall.
And then all of a sudden, then the next little bit in his talk, he says, and then all of a sudden they literally step apart from each other because now they see
Right.
darkness.
Yeah. John Paul II talks about this in Theology of the Body quite often. It really, his whole focus is on this Genesis story between Adam and Eve, and what he would call that. There was this understanding of original modesty and original justice that Adam and Eve would look upon their naked of each other, not see each other as an object of lust, but a very image of God in each other, right? And which would make now they never got to this point because this happened after the fall, but before the fall, there was a question about, well, how can reproduction come about, right? So there would be probably some natural action, probably the same we experience today, but it wouldn't be an act of lust, it would be an act of love, pure
Right.
self-gift.
A true union.
A true union, right?
Okay.
Now, we can still experience that today, right? That's, what we all would say that in the bond of marriage, that when a man and woman engage with each other in the marital act, that's a reproclamation of their vows to each other, the gift of self.
Question.
Okay.
And I'm it's not my experience,
Yeah,
okay? But
yeah.
and I'm taking all of this
Sure.
in and saying, how's it gonna fit with me?
Uh-huh.
Even with all the
Yeah.
cleaning house that I'm
Yeah.
trying to do. And maybe I don't even want to ask the question. Okay, I'll have to pray on this one.
All right.
Because I can see that side of it, but because of my history, I'm like,
Yeah.
no.
And to be fair, we'll talk about the sacrament of marriage in a later date
Okay.
too. So there'll be plenty of opportunity to talk about this in
All
our say and other things. But But yeah, so we understand that with Adam and Eve, there was this understanding of like this original grace that was given to them, that they didn't see each other as objects, as images and likeness of God.
They weren't hiding.
No, there was a beauty involved with that, right?
Okay.
It wasn't until the fall they actually, that's why they put clothes on, because, oh, wow, I'm feeling this objectification of you.
It went both
Right?
ways.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So, so we understand that God could create somebody in that state, right? He did already. And so it's very reasonable he could do it again. Now, we may ask ourselves, why doesn't he just do that with everybody? Well, I think because of the mission that Mary had, she had to be given that special grace. Because we understand philosophically that in order for God to take on our human nature, it would have to come from an immaculate, pure vessel, right? And where Adam and Eve failed in their reception of that grace and the turn away from God, Mary rectified that with her fiat. Where Eve and Adam said no to God, the new Eve said yes to him, which brought about the new Adam.
Jesus.
Yeah. There's a beautiful symmetry in the way God works, right? So God created a man and woman, then it took a woman to bring about a man to rectify that, right? There's kind of it's a beautiful symmetry that God always has of these things.
This is a whole other question.
Good.
Well, it is, but it isn't. I guess I should preface it with what comes first, thinking, believing, or knowing? Because I'm kind of like going around and around and around in this.
Yeah, so there's an epistemological question there. So it really stems from where does our knowledge come from, right? How do we receive that? And what do we do with it, right? And we understand there's what we call the mode of the receiver. So knowledge is from God regardless.
Okay.
Right? So the way we receive that, though, is kind of something that's proper to us. We see that in society. People learn different ways. Some are audible learners, some are more visual learners. So we would understand that that's something, knowledge is something external. So we as humans need to experience and gain in order to actually know something, right?
Okay, so that helps with part of it.
Yeah.
But my devil's advocate question is, Mary being the mother of Jesus, even though Jesus is God, I understand that. Why isn't Mary higher than him? Because she's his mother.
Yeah, well, because of the natures of the two. Mary's human, Jesus is divine and human, right?
So his divinity supplants.
Of course. In the same way with Adam and Eve, right? Adam and Eve were created just like Mary, but God still was above them.
Correct.
In the same way with Jesus.
Okay.
Right? So Jesus is God, so he's definitely above Mary.
Okay.
Mary was human, but she had these preternatural gifts of this special grace that kept her completely in line with God's will. Right?
Okay.
So in other words, could she have sinned? Yeah, she could have. In the same way Adam and Eve could have sinned, and they did. But Mary didn't.
If she had said no, would that be
good? Yeah. So that goes back to the question we were talking about at the beginning, right? What happened if Mary said no? Well, presumably God would go to plan C. Right? Plan A was I gotta have an Eve. Okay, they got a free will, but I know they're in line with me, and okay, they failed. All right, plan B. I know what I'm gonna do. Hey, I got the second person of the Trinity, my son Jesus. I'm gonna send him to again rectify, reconnect me with humanity, this little creation I love. I'm gonna send my beloved son to take on their nature, that I can actually then God and man can combine, and I can rectify that fall from the original sin. Okay, great. But I still need a human being free will to say yes. Right? Okay, I'm going to design. I got this. Okay, Mary. I got Mary from the beginning, from all through eternity. I have this woman, Mary. She's going to be made pure. She's going to be made innocent. She's going to be undefiled. I'm going to preserve her from the sin from her first parents. And she's going to be the one to have to say yes. Great. Gabriel, get down there. Ask her. I mean, so, okay, if she says no, what's my plan C? We don't know that, right? That would have been in the mind of God. Praise God, we didn't have to go that far. But also, the very interesting thing about God is usually his backup plan is the best thing for us.
That I believe.
It's an interesting debate, and I may have brought this up before in one of these, I can't remember, but there's a debate between the Franciscans and the Jesuits about would Jesus have come if Adam and Eve didn't sin? Now, the Jesuits take the tack because they're more, rationalistic about these things. That because if Adam and Eve didn't sin, Jesus wouldn't have to come, therefore he wouldn't. Right? Hey, we didn't sever that relationship with God, so no need for Jesus. The Franciscans, I think, take a more balanced look at it. And I think that's more in line with charity in the mind of God. What they say is, well, of course Jesus would come because that's better for humanity. It's better that God takes on our nature and relates to us in that way. That's better for us. And so, yeah, he would. Now, the church doesn't definitively say either one. You can hold whatever one's more reasonable to you. I kind of like the Franciscans more. Because I think it's more in line with how God operates. Right? But the Jesuits could be right too. So if Mary would have said no, what was plan C? I don't know. Could God have just done that with somebody else? Well, we're told very clearly in Scripture that in the fullness of time, he did all these things. So in other words, it was God's perfect timing that brought this about.
And we don't know what his time is.
No, but we have to trust that, well, it happened in this time. It couldn't have happened any other time or any other scenario other than what was planned. And so in that respect, well, then no, it couldn't have been anyone other than Mary. Right? Could have God picked someone else from the beginning of the time to figure out, like Mary said, no, sure. But man, or would even send Jesus at that point as a plan C. Because that seemed like that was already been done. What would have been better? What would have been the next best thing? I don't know. And we'll never know because, well, it didn't happen. Praise God. Right. So,
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
So you hear many times that, God knows everything, even knows the number of hairs on your head.
Mm-hmm.
Does God know what I'm going to do next week?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so he knew that Mary would say yes.
Yeah. So let's kind of break that down a little bit. We talk about the knowledge of God and how that interacts with free will. Because what you could conclude there, right, is that, well, if God doesn't know what I do because I'm the God's whatever. Well, yeah, but that also shows how we interact with God's will. Right? So in other words, God, if you're presented with a decision, Paul, God knows the consequences and effects of everything from that decision you make, whether one way or another. And he can make good come from that regardless of what you choose. But for spreading more grace and being a channel of that grace, it's better for you to make the decision in line with his will rather than bring the other one about, right? So
I agree.
So that's really where our free will comes into play. We can choose to work with God's will and actually bring about more grace for each other and ourselves, or not. But God knows the outcome of that regardless and how that affects who and what.
Yep.
We don't necessarily know that.
Right.
Yeah.
So he knew years and years and years ago that I was going to be gung-ho insane for 50 years. And in my 62nd, going on 63rd year, I was going to all of a sudden arrive at the decision to join the Catholic Church.
He knew that was a possibility. He knew that was a possibility outcome of this, right? But you had to still choose that, Kate.
Right, that's what I'm saying.
Right. So he knew, like I said, he knew all the choices we could make and all the outcomes of those choices. But to actually make it reality, we have to choose it. We have a hand, right? We have to end it. You have to put that potentiality into action.
Okay.
As St. Thomas Aquinas would say. God knows everything potential.
Okay.
Right? We don't know everything potential, but we do when we put it in actualization, it becomes reality.
Okay.
And God allows that.
Even
right,
if
wrong, or
it's a
different.
sin?
He was bad, right, wrong, or different, so that he can also bring good from that as well.
Okay,
So maybe put this in perspective. I think I've told some of you guys this before. I started discerning the priest when I was like 12, right? So I was Catholic my entire life, but I started thinking about the priest when I was 12. I started running away at 17, right? I reconnected at 30. Now it's interesting, my reflection and my prayer on that time, especially now when now that I am ordained. I grieve the fact that maybe I could have been doing this for 15 more years than I really have been now.
Would have been the same.
Well, and that's the thing. But the happiness I probably experienced would have been. The fulfillment I've experienced would have been.
Maybe.
But would I have been as an effective minister in his plan if I didn't do what I did? I don't know. Probably not. Right?
You did what God wanted you to do.
Well, maybe, because here's the thing, I don't know. Would have been better for me and maybe for God's church and God's plan if I went to the seminary when I was right out of high school.
But you're trying to change what God already made.
But that's what the point I'm trying to make there, Mickey, is I don't know that. I know I probably would have been happier in that time. I don't know if I would actually gotten to the seminary or not. I know but now, knowing who I know, I could have experienced this happiness for much longer than I have been.
Yeah.
And will.
but were you yourself, Father Mark, in all aspects of your character ready at 17, 18?
Yeah, and that's the thing. No, I can say I wasn't, but then also too, I don't know how much I was listening either.
Which is where I am now.
Yeah. So part of that for me was, well, I was kind of running away. It wasn't really anything like God prompted me to, just like I was fearful. I was afraid. And that drove me to choose something else. Knowing what I know now, I know that was very irrational fear, and would have been better for me if I went through after high school. I don't know that. I know I'm much happier now in the life I'm living than the life I was. So I could have experienced that much sooner than I am now. But again, God had brought some good from that because I think I gained wisdom. I can bring that to my ministry, which is great, right? Because it's not about me, it's about the people I'm serving. Okay. And God had all of our best interests at heart, right? So that's the way kind of God would work in those respects. We're dumb. we're stupid. We're humans. We're stupid. God knows everything. He knows the outcome of all of our actions, but we have to put that into actuality for something to come about from it. Okay. And that's what's kind of beautiful about Mary is that she had this knowledge too, right? She knew the consequence of her actions, which made it a free will yes. It wasn't a blind faith yes. It was, okay, I know what the outcome, I know what the consequences are, and I'm going to say yes to it. Okay. Now, you had a question about Joseph.
Yeah.
Can I ask a quick question?
Please.
Original sin.
Yes.
What categories it fit in?
What do you mean?
Mortal or venial?
Oh, it can't be necessarily mortal. Because original sin, you're talking about the original sin of Adam and Eve.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're born with original sin. Are we born with mortal sin?
Yeah.
Okay, so
we are severed from God in our mortal sin.
So here's a follow-on question.
Yeah.
What happens to all those people that never get baptized?
Yeah, well, we understand that if you're not baptized, you cannot enter the heavenly kingdom. But we'll talk about this when we talk about baptism in a few months.
Okay.
We understand there's 3 types of baptism. There's sacramental baptism,
which is what we get.
Which is what we get. There's baptism by desire. There's baptism by blood. So I say that because the church teaches that it's not just sacramental baptism that can actually get you into heaven. The fundamental question comes, well, could atheists go to heaven? Yeah. Now, there's some nuance involved with that because, well, we would say that someone who maybe had unwillful ignorance, right? Maybe they really had no business knowing anything about God or Jesus. there was no possibility they could learn anything about God or Jesus.
So some tribe in the middle of.
So probably
somewhere.
some wherever, right? As long as they're trying to do good and follow their conscience, we understand they're implicitly serving God. In which case, God would not abandon them, and would supply the grace of baptism to them, even if they weren't sacramentally baptized. That's a lot different than willful ignorance.
Correct.
So willful ignorance would be like, well, I know that I probably should study this more or learn more about this, but you know what? I don't feel like it, or I don't want to, or I've already made my mind and there's nothing that can change that.
So that's like me after reading this since July, all of a sudden saying, nope.
Well, I mean, yes and no. I mean, it depends. So what I'm saying is there's a difference between recognizing God as God, and there's something higher than myself that creates all things and serves all things and sustains all things. That it's not just about this life and that's it. And that's much different than like, well, I have a particular devotion, but I'm not really, I don't know if that's really for me. That's a much different thing, right? So in other words, a willful ignorance would be like, well, I've studied it completely. I think I have a full knowledge of it. I'm still open to anything may happen. Any more information may come, but I maybe just don't know. Right?
Okay.
That's different than, okay, I know I haven't really studied all this, but you know what? I don't care. This feels right. I'm just going to go with that. I'm going to doubt everything else, even though I haven't looked at it. I'm just going to go with this. That's my call.
Okay.
That's really the difference between doubting and questioning. There's a difference between those two. It's like agnostics, for instance, right? I think that's a great example. I think most agnostics will say, you know what? I just don't know enough. Good. Okay, good. That shows an openness. There's something you can work with there, right? And even if someone were to die in that state and just maybe hadn't had the time to go look at these things and go deeper into it, we would even trust if they're trying to serve God or to do good for one another. They're implicitly serving God and God will provide them the grace. That's much different than someone's like, nope, there's no God. No, you can't change my mind. There's no information you can give me that will change that mind. And I'm, also too, I don't care about humanity at all. I'm just going to live for myself and that's going to be about it. Well, okay, we don't know the concept. Do they really believe that and confess that? Or something going on in their hearts that maybe are opening up a little bit? We trust that God's mercy will even go into them, right? And even at the moment of their death, that there's a moment of like, oh, I'm sorry, God, and grant me peace.
That's a different deal.
That's a different deal. They're saying there's no atheists in foxholes, right?
Amen, brother.
Right. So I mean, we trust that God's going to work on people regardless. Is it possible though that people reject that grace and say, nope, I'm not going to change my mind and that's it? Sure. Will they be granted salvation? I don't know.
We're not the ones.
I'm not the ones to make the decision.
Yeah.
That's up to God, right? So I mean, it goes. There's another question that usually people ask, like, is there anybody in hell? Here's the thing. I hope not, but it's highly improbable there's nobody in hell. I mean, I hope there's nobody there, but we don't know for sure. It's reasonable to think there are, just from a probability standpoint, right? I don't know. But even hell is an act of God's love. Right?
Someplace to be.
Well, the question comes, and we talk about this RCA, right? Is it better to not exist or go to hell?
And then I'd rather be in hell.
If you don't exist, that means God does not love you or thinking of you.
At all.
Or at all. If you're in hell, usually it means God loves you and thinks about you, but you've rejected that completely. Okay.
I don't want to get off on a tangent here, but
yeah,
the Catholic Church teaches that if you die in a state of mortal sin, you do not go to heaven.
Right.
Catholic Church also teaches it's a mortal sin to miss Mass on Sunday.
Correct.
So if you miss Mass on Sunday, you die on Monday.
Yeah. So willfully miss Mass on Sunday. We have to be very clear about that, first off. Secondly, we also have to understand what the definition of mortal sin is. So the definition of mortal sin is it's a bad thing. To miss Mass is a bad thing. It's not giving God his proper due, right? It's actually an act of injustice to miss Mass. against God.
Just Sundays or,
Holy days of obligation.
okay,
So you come daily mass, that's great. I'm not going to say don't, right? Because that's a beautiful devotion to do, right? You have to. No, there's no obligation to go to mass every day. We offer mass every day because that's something good to do. And people
but
are
Sundays are.
Sundays are
obligatory.
obligatory and holy days of obligation are obligatory.
And how do I know what those are?
Yeah, great, good. We will let you
You'll be
know.
told. He'll tell you.
So to give you a base of that, and we'll talk about this more, but in the United, so a lot of that depends on where you live. So it is, for instance, in the United States, we have certain holy days of obligation, but if you were going to like Italy, for instance, you may have a lot more, right? Because the bishops make those determinations.
Okay,
More precisely, the bishop of a particular diocese makes those determinations, but they're more broader done through a conference. So
okay,
yeah.
next question, and this is just because I'm selfish.
Yeah.
Why don't we have, other than Saturday or Sunday vigil mass
Mhm.
and Sunday evening mass, why don't we have evening mass? Or one other evening mass during the week?
Some parishes do.
Some do.
Why don't we?
We haven't had the well, part of that's like the supply and demand, right? We haven't had the demand. So in other words, to turn on the lights, to get everything set up, to burn the candles and whatever else, turn on the air conditioner for 2 people wouldn't be a prudent use of our stewardship. But if we had maybe like 20 or 30, okay, maybe you're right. Part of that is a prudential pastoral judgment. And part of that's based on, is there demand in the parish for that?
And that's part of the decline.
I don't know if that's part of the decline. I mean, one thing we offer here in our parish is a very early mass for those who are going to work in the morning, right? And so
decline as in, like you said, there's no physical interest shown or spoken about.
Right.
Whereas for me, even though I'm.
Yeah, and I think it depends on the parish too, because like for our parish in particular, right, we're primarily we have a lot of young families in our parish, right? And so what does a young family do at 5, 6 o'clock in the afternoon? Well, they're probably going to soccer practice or basketball practice, or trying to get dinner ready, and then trying to put the kids to bed. Okay, so maybe an evening mass wouldn't be very prudent for them. Maybe others it might be, but again, it's part of that demand. Is there really a need? Is there a demand for it? Also, what resources do we have? So we already have 2 priests during the day. We actually used to have, I think, 4 daily masses at one point here in St. Gabriel.
That's before my time.
But right. So I mean, but also we had more priests. So it all is kind of, it all gets wrapped up together in many ways, right? But a lot of that comes from, okay, what is the demand and what are the resources we have to do that?
One more question.
Okay.
Then I'll shut up for a minute. Just by accident, because I was looking at the RCIA video from Sunday, you have quote unquote Latin class.
Yes.
And then the Latin mass coming up.
Yes.
So how do I sign up for all that?
If you want, I can add you to the Rate Cheli group in Block Notes to get notifications.
Okay.
But the Latin class are actually recorded and uploaded.
Right.
And the mass itself is on December 16th.
Okay.
But we actually are having a mass on the 18th of October at noon. And that's just dependent on my mass schedule personally.
Oh, so it's not
a regular one.
Just
no. It depends on if I personally have the mass that week or not.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Just to amplify a little bit, Mary Magdalene and Brentwood, they have a 5:30 mass at night, Monday through Thursday. My wife and I have gone there a number of times, and most of the people that go there are working people on their way home.
Right. Yeah, so it depends. Right with that. All right, so back to Joseph. The question about Joseph coming, so this is actually another revealing portion, and this comes from Matthew chapter 1, verse 18. Now this is how the birth of Jesus Christ came about. When his mother Mary was betrothed to Joseph, but before they lived together, so they were married, but part of the Jewish ceremonial rite was you get married, but then you don't actually, the wife doesn't come into the home until the husband builds the house and gets everything ready. So that could take anywhere between a few weeks up until maybe a year. So they're married, but they're not living together right now. Okay. she was found with child through the Holy Spirit. Joseph, her husband, since he was a righteous man, yet unwilling to expose her to shame, decided to divorce her quietly. That's a very interesting verse in verse 19. And the reason it's so interesting is because Joseph doesn't say a word in the entire gospel. And there's only one word that ever describes Joseph. As a matter of fact, it's only actually mentioned a handful of times. Here in Matthew, when the calling of Gabriel, when they flee to Egypt and come back, at the temple where they lose him, and then it's mentioned that Joseph dies. But the only word that describes him in the entire Bible is this word, righteous. What does it mean in the Jewish context to be righteous?
I remember.
Yeah, Kate, what does that mean?
Following the law.
Follows the law. He follows the law. But wait a minute. Mary was found with child before they lived together, which implies that she committed adultery. It says he was unwilling to expose her shame. He decided to divorce her quietly. Now, the law of Moses would dictate that if a woman is found in adultery, she needs to be stoned. Death is the penalty for a woman who's caught in adultery. And if Joseph were righteous, well, that's what the law dictates, Joseph. So what are you doing here? Well, even back then, they could tell if a woman was still a virgin, even after pregnancy, right? Check the hymen. That was still, an aspect even back then. So presumably she was still found to be a virgin. So this leaves three aspects of Joseph. Either he's very charitable with Mary, but that doesn't mean he's righteous. It's possible that they had a vow of celibacy with each other. That even though, this could be because of the age differences, who really knows for sure, but it was thought that maybe Mary and Joseph had what they called an Essene marriage. And the Essenes were a sect of the priests in Judaism at the time of Jesus that practiced celibacy. And other lay people would follow that practice too. So it was kind of a common, or at least a growing practice, that couples would not necessarily engage in marital act even after they've been betrothed. But even then, that still shows that Joseph may be very charitable, but not necessarily righteous. What this may indicate, though, is that Joseph believed Mary. That when Mary said, yeah, you know what, the Gabriel came to me and said I was going to conceive the Son of God, Joseph believed her. And this action on Joseph's part was not an act of really cruelty or letting Mary be with whoever she wants to be with, or an act of charity. It's kind of an act of fear. What Joseph's really telling Mary right there is, I'm not your guy. You need to find someone better. You're bearing the Son of God? No thanks. Right? I'm not the most virtuous. I'm not the most, humble. I'm not the most whatever. You got to find someone better. A king, maybe, right? Something like that. Someone actually take care of you and take care of this child, because that's important. It's like my approach to becoming a bishop. I don't want that, right? Don't know. Let's pray that I never asked, right? But Joseph was asked. And so this really is an action on his part to say, go find someone better. And that shows also who Mary is. This purity, right? This virtue that she had was known. One of the main things we read, it's not in any of the Gospels, actually is one of the apocryphal Gospels, the Gospel of James. I think I've talked about this before. In it, there's sort of a story about the betrothal of Mary and Joseph. That's actually where we get Mary's parents, Joachim and Anne's names. It was said that Joachim and Anne, they wanted to have this competition for the hand of Mary, that they wanted the best person to be the husband of Mary. And so they had this kind of competition. And the competition was all the people would come up, they would grab the staff, And if the staff blossomed, that was a sign from God that person was destined to become Mary's betrothed. And that goes back to the Old Testament. We have this actually from Aaron, the brother of Moses, who was the first high priest. It was said as a sign of his high priesthood that his staff blossomed. That was a sign from God that he was the chosen for high priest, right? So this was a similar experiment. So Yochanan and Ann kind of, they knew the scriptures, they knew what they were doing, said, okay, whoever grabs the staff, that's a sign from God, you're going to be Mary's betrothed. Everyone in the land did it. Joseph comes up, and of course, the staff blossoms, which is why in many statues you see Joseph with the staff that's blossomed like a lily. Mm-hmm. That comes from that story in the Gospel of James, which is an apocryphal book. And also there may be some like Odysseus in that, right? The Odyssey, like when Odysseus comes back to his homeland, he finds there's a bunch of suitors that are pursuing his wife. And so he actually enters the competition disguised and kind of beats them all. So it's kind of a interesting kind of corollary between those things, which is also a reason why the writer of James was probably not the original writer. It wasn't actually James. Also was written a few hundred years after the death of James. And there's some other stories in that gospel that really don't coincide with what was handed down by the apostles about who Jesus was. Namely, there was a story about he got mad at one of his friends, so Jesus decided to smote him and then repented and brought him back to life. Well, okay, the problem with that is, well, God, in his mercy and love, will not smote anybody in that respect, and nor can God repent. I mean, it's told in the Old Testament oftentimes that God repents or whatever, but again, that's a human way of applying something to God that really we can't understand, right? It's a way that we can maybe reason certain things, but that's not really the nature of God. God cannot contradict himself. He can't move and then turn back, right? That's just not who God is. But we read these stories in the Old Testament where he says, okay, he puts the ban on people, and he repented of his actions and brought peace or whatever. That was just a way for humans to understand kind of how God was interacting with their lives. God's will is still going to persevere, and it's never backwards, always forward, right? So we also want to keep that in mind, because we also read the Old Testament in light of the New, right? So that's why that book was not brought into the Bible. But again, we see this kind of evidence from Joseph himself about who Mary is too, which then also shows that Jesus really is God. Right? We hold that Mary is perpetual virgin, that she was a virgin before, during, and after her birth. And we see this in the Old Testament, the virgin remains very dim, but also in the Song of Songs, we talk about this undefiled garden that cannot be entered, right? That's kind of a symbol for Mary. We understand that her birth was without pain, because one of the effects of the fall was childbirth pain, childbirth, right? Now, it says in Genesis that it will be more severe, the childbirth. Okay, well, could there have been some? Sure, but who knows for sure. A lot of church fathers think of the birth of Jesus as being sort of like a kind of an energetic birth, where the body was not necessarily coming straight out, but it was being formed as it came out or something. Is that accurate? We don't really know. The church really doesn't hold that either way, but we do understand that Mary was not in as much pain as a normal woman would have been in childbearing. She was the epitome of virtue, given this great grace from Immaculate Conception, which we celebrate on every December 8th. But also what the Catechism talks about is Mary is a type of the church. That as she was the mother of God, she also becomes the mother of church at the crucifixion. That Jesus gives Mary to his apostle.
Right? Okay. Right. I was just going to ask about Peter. Yeah. Okay.
So Mary becomes a type of the church, but also the mother of the church. And that's actually signified as well in the book of Revelation. So we see this woman who is in child pain, right? Giving birth. And a lot of theologians actually equate that to Mary giving birth to the church. Because we would say, well, why would Mary be in child pain when she's giving birth to Jesus? Well, in Revelation, she's not giving birth to Jesus, she's giving birth to us, who are sinful, right? Problematic. So Mary's really, really important. And we recognize that in the teaching of the church about all these teachings. And we have to hold all these, or else, really our understanding of Jesus always collapses too. Right? He, being God, he'd have to be born in an immaculate vessel. Right? It had to be in a very supernatural way. And it had to come through human willing it to reconcile us with God. The other very significant thing about that too is we believe Mary was give Jesus his body. And in order to actually reconcile us with God, all that was necessary was shedding of blood. And it's interesting to think about what that means. So once Mary said yes, if, let's say, Mary would have miscarried or aborted, or even at the severance of the umbilical cord, once that blood was shed, we were saved. Now, would we have known it?
Oh,
No, which is why his mission had to be fulfilled. That culminated in the death, his passion, death, and resurrection. Because not only that, through his life, he gave us these means of grace, which we call the sacraments, to actually connect us with him in a deeper way and know and be assured of our salvation.
can we talk about the Mass a minute?
Mass?
Yeah.
Okay.
Specifically, and I've heard it twice. And I can't quote it, but where the Holocaust is mentioned in the Eucharistic prayer. Why is that the case?
Okay, are you asking why is the word Holocaust used, or what
Yes.
is okay? Because that's what the sacrifice of Jesus was.
Okay.
It was a Holocaust. It was an offering, right? It was a sacrificial offering.
Okay.
And so that's what when we come to Masses, we're witnessing. There's a lot of symbolism in Mass there, but there's also something that's actually real. And we understand that at the Eucharistic prayer, we're being brought presently to the passion, death, and resurrection of Jesus. Right. There are actions and words being said. So when the priest says, "This is my body, this is my blood," he's doing the same action as Jesus is always doing continually at his own Last Supper, which then brings about his body and blood to us. When he elevates the separated body and blood in what they call the doxology in the Eucharistic prayer, we are brought to the moment of the crucifixion, where Jesus' body and blood are separated. At the Lamb of God, there's what we call fractioning, right, where the priest breaks the body over the chalice and then puts a little piece of the body in with the chalice, right? So to find the resurrection of Jesus, his body and blood now coming back together. We were brought present to the tomb.
Yeah, I'm trying to connect Mary. I mean, I know the connection.
Yeah,
I'm trying to put the pieces together.
Yeah. Well,
between her sacrifice. And Jesus' sacrifice.
Well, we understand that they're not the same.
They're not the same.
Right. If you want to call them that her Mary's fiat, a sacrifice, I guess you could. I don't know if she would say that.
I think what I mean by Mary's sacrifice is the fact that she knew from a point.
I mean, sure. I mean,
she was going to lose him.
Yeah. I mean, and again, she probably didn't know exactly all the details, but the pain of witnessing her son being scourged.
Yeah.
The pain of the crucifixion, holding his body in her arms after the crucifixion and placing his body in the tomb. I mean, we say this all the time. No parent should ever bury their child. There's something unnatural about that. And even though Mary knew that would happen, that doesn't mean her human emotion and pain wouldn't be severe and significant. So yeah, there is a sacrifice. I see what you're saying that. There's a sacrifice in that. But that is not the salvific sacrifice that Jesus made for us.
Right. Because he took everything from everybody from all time.
Right.
And not that he was a small man, I'm sure he was.
Yeah. Well, to that point, it's kind of interesting to think about that too. When we actually look at the medical aspects of Jesus' passion, death, and resurrection, some different interesting aspects we have to keep in mind. I think this kind of gets lost in the shuffle sometimes. Yeah, so Jesus was a carpenter, and what that meant was not just like working with wood. he probably would have worth like stone and anything other material that you could think of. So he was a strong guy. I mean, he didn't have a donkey. He would have walked everywhere. So he was pretty fit. But when we look at the actual crucifixion, first thing you have to recognize this happened at the agony of the garden after the Last Supper. He was beaten and dragged to the house of Caiaphas, where there was this mock trial that happened. And he was kept in the basement of Caiaphas' house. If you've ever been there, it's in the Holy Land. You guys went there, right? Yeah. It's like a 30 feet, maybe 20, 40 feet. Yeah. 40 feet, just like cylindrical tube. Then they'd be lowered down from the top. And they lowered down to the point where their tiptoes could touch the bottom, but their hands would be, they'd be suspended up from the top. So he spent the entire night.
Basically hanging.
Yeah. Morning came, they took him to Pilate, wanted to crucify him. Pilate's like, what he hasn't committed any capital, offense. So in order to quiet them, he has them scourged. Now, with scourging, we have to understand the Jews had specific limitations on scourging. They said no more than 40 lashes, right? The Romans had a different understanding.
Yeah, it was everything, but.
Well, when they scourged, what that meant was that the entire cohort of soldiers, which is about 10 to 15 guys, they would take turns until they got tired. And then that would be it. Oftentimes in a Roman scourging, the person would survive. And it wasn't just like, leather. It would be what they call cat o' nine tails, so metal and bone. They would dig into the flesh and rip it from the bone. So it wasn't 40, it could have been 400 for all we know, right? Who knows? Most people walked away from that, they would die almost instantaneously, or if not very soon afterwards. And so, in other words, what Pilate was trying to do was say, look, we're just going to do this to him. He's going to get his punishment, let it alone. But the people would not be, qualified by that. So we're going to Barabbas and let them choose. So he was really just trying to wash his hands of this thing, right? That's what he was really trying to do. They chose Barabbas, and then not only that, then he had to bear his cross, walk 1.5 miles to Golgotha, nailed to it, and hung there for 3 hours, naked. Now, I don't know about you, but I think any other human being would not have survived even the walking up the hill.
Which is where his divine power comes from.
I think we'd have to say that. And no other time in Roman history has anyone ever received that much punishment before or after. There's never been a recorded instance, except for Jesus, that's ever been done before or after. So when we say that Jesus took upon our sins, bodily, mentally, emotionally, yeah, that's what he did. And Mary was present the entire time with him there.
I can't wrap my head around what he did. I mean, it's just.
Well, have you ever watched Passion of the Christ?
Yes.
Yeah, I think that, from my understanding, that's the most accurate depiction of what actually happened.
I can intellectualize it until day after life ends.
Yeah.
But I mean, for me too, and again, it's just the word that I have right now for me to swallow that whole and know that he did it for me. But the flip side is I did that to him.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
I can't.
Right. Yeah. And that's kind of the idea. That's the whole point about this too, Kate, is that there's nothing we can do that can actually reciprocate that. There's nothing we can do because we're the ones that did it to him and continue to do it to him. There's nothing we can do that can actually make it all better, which is why we needed him in the first place. So that's kind of the but also what that shows is the immense love and gift that he gives us in himself, that we receive at the Eucharist. The same Eucharist that Mary would have received. I think it was one of my brother priests made a very I think controversial, but very true statement about the Eucharist. That when we receive the Eucharist, we're actually receiving a greater gift than Mary received at the Incarnation. I think that's interesting to ponder. I don't know if it's true, and I don't think the church would definitively teach either way. But that does coincide with what we believe the Eucharist to be. That Jesus was still a separate entity in Mary's womb, a separate being. When we receive the Eucharist, we become one with him and he with us. And so I think there's something about that. I don't know. But Mary still received it too, as a follower of Christ.
She didn't receive it after his. I guess she would have from the apostles
Sure.
as they broke.
Yeah. I'm sure John would have given her daily communion. Sure. He was a priest. Why not? She had plenty around him for to do that. All the apostles flocked to her after the death of Christ.
She was the mother of them all.
Right.
By adoption.
And who wouldn't want to take care of their moms?
Okay.
Question.
Yeah.
Where did Mary die?
There is actually an interesting question. There's a lot of debate about that. Some people think Ephesus, which is actually in Asia Minor, or
Right.
Turkey, Turkey.
She went there with John.
Right, they lived there, which is why the Council of Ephesus would have occurred there, right?
There's a church in Jerusalem that has.
Right. Some think she actually was in Jerusalem, because we have the Church of the Assumption in Jerusalem, right? Others think it was actually Mount Carmel, which is kind of fitting because that's where Elijah would have been, who also assumed in heaven, right? Yeah, I don't know. It's debatable.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, we'll never know because we don't have any remains, right? That's another aspect of the dogma to understand too, is that we see Mary was assumed in heaven, body and soul, which leads on to the interesting question about, did Mary die? Well, scripture kind of tells us there are several figures in the Old Testament that were assumed. The first one we know being Enoch, who's only mentioned initially in Genesis. It says he walked with God and was assumed in heaven. The second figure is debatable, Moses. So Moses, we know where he was buried. We're told specifically in Exodus and Deuteronomy where that happened. Different names, but probably have different names for the same place typically. What's kind of funny though is they can't find his bones anywhere. So, okay, there's another one possibly. Finally, Elijah, we're told specifically that he was assumed in heaven in the Book of Kings. Body and soul. That was witnessed by his apprentice, Elisha. So we have two figures who assumed didn't die, although we don't really know. Maybe they died on the way, who knows. And one that did and was assumed. So that doesn't really give us a clear indication what happened with Mary. There's two schools of thought on that too. Well, would Mary do anything different than her son? So if her son died, it would make sense and be fitting that she would too. But also, the other argument would be it's a greater glorification of God if she didn't. And the fact she had the preternatural gifts would indicate that she probably couldn't have. Yeah, and you can hold either one of those two. You have to hold, though, that she was assumed body and soul in heaven. You have to believe that. We also believe that she sits at the right hand of, she sits as Queen of Heaven. She's crowned as Queen of Heaven and Earth. And which is also why we ask for intercession, because we also trust that Jesus will never deny his mother anything. And I think it goes back to Old Testament. I mean, it's interesting that in the Old Testament, when we talk about queens, the queen is not the wife of the king. The queen is the mother of the king. And so even from the time of David, Saul, all the way down through all the kings, the mother was always the queen. And so if you wanted something done, you would go to the queen. Because the king is not going to deny his mother, you would hope. In the same way, Jesus being the supreme king, the most just king, the most virtuous king, and Mary being the most virtuous queen, if we go to her, Jesus will not deny her that. Right? So, again, matters of theology would hold true. Wonderful. Thoughts, feelings, desires, heresies?
Learned a lot tonight.
Good.
Can I ask just some?
Of course.
Some general info questions?
Yeah, no problem.
Keeps coming to mind, and I don't know if it's stage of life or state in life. Does that make sense to you?
I don't know there's really much of a difference.
Okay.
Well, I mean, let's put it away. There might be. Stage in life could be a level of growth or decline, where state of life is a level of being.
That doesn't still really.
Okay, so
I'll do some more.
Well, maybe the distinction might be this. You grow into adulthood.
Right.
You have no control over that, right? That could be a stage of life.
Okay.
But your state of life, you may have more control over. Meaning, well, am I living a virtuous life? Am I living a comfortable life?
Okay.
Right. We also understand that when it comes to the moral life. So when we talk about like things like heaven, the afterlife, heaven, hell, we don't look at heaven, hell, purgatory as places or times. They're outside of those things. We look at them as states of being.
That's what I was trying to say.
Yeah.
Okay.
States of existence.
The other thing, and this is just because I'm bored, I admit I'm home all the time. Is there, for want of a better word, a compassionate service group of women in the church? And
A lot.
well, I mean, specifically like for the shut-ins who would need housekeeping services, or new moms who have family, but maybe the family, moms and dads and uncles and whatnot aren't in town, but they might welcome a couple of days worth of meals prepared and brought in.
Yeah, so we do know there are like religious orders that really have a particular charisms. Like for instance, the Missionaries of Charity.
But I mean specifically here at St. Gabe's.
Well, I mean, we have several organizations that like Judy Hunter heads up. She has like volunteers that would help for those types of services. We have like a day of service which is coming up this weekend where the people of the parish get together and go around and help people in the neighborhood. I mean, you could even say we have things like St. Vincent de Paul, and now I mean they're not necessarily same sex. But a lot of this really comes down to our mission as Christians to, feed the hungry and clothe the naked and, shelter the homeless, right? Those are corporal works of mercy. Okay. And we're all called to do that regardless, right? But as far as like a structured organization, I mean, yes and no. I mean, all the different aspects, there's all the organizations of the parish in different aspects handle those different things. Yeah. But it's not just like one particular organization that does those things. Yeah. Now, maybe there could be. It used to be that the Legion of Mary would be the one to kind of coordinate those things. Legion of Mary was sort of like a head position that kind of that every organization would have a delegate that would go to these meetings and they would kind of figure out what the best way to handle certain circumstances within a parish would be. That's kind of what's a charitable word? That's kind of become more of a spiritual aspect. Okay. Of parish life, which isn't bad, but it's a little less oriented towards like actions of that nature. But that was originally what Legion of Mary was supposed to be. Okay. Yeah. So maybe we can do a rejuvenation of Legion of Mary. I don't know. Yeah. Okay.
You did brag on my grandson a little bit.
Should I turn off the recorder? Yeah. Okay. All right, well, everyone have a great night. Thanks for coming. We'll see you all later.